James Mirtle, Senior Managing Editor at The Athletic. Good morning.
Good morning, JD.
How are we?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. I've said already, I'm weirdly calm considering the Leafs' bad starts, but I also feel like this one is different. Where are you at with just the struggles that we've seen from this team so far, in terms of your concern meter?
Yeah, I think it should be dialed fairly high for Game 13 of the season. The funny thing, though, when you say that is everyone says, "Oh, the Toronto media and." They struggled last year, and everyone, there was this big show about it, and then they were fined. I mean, the difference, they've got different personnel this year. They've got worse personnel. The roster's not as good.
Mm-hmm.
And everything about what's gone into their record this year is worse than last time around. If you look at it, they're worse defensively. They're worse on the penalty kill. The goaltending is worse. And really, they've only got 6 wins in 13 games right now, because Austin Matthews has scored an incredible number of goals. Nylander's been really, really prolific. Basically, their big guys have propped them up, and they've had a couple of nice moments and nice comebacks. But other than that, there's been a lot of ugly hockey so far this season for this team.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree, man. What do you do with Klingberg?
Honestly, for sure he's got to sit.
Mm-hmm.
For sure he has to sit. And I think they must almost be there, because Lagesson played more than he did last night against Ottawa. Lagesson played just shy of 20 minutes and played a lot better
mm-hmm.
than Klingberg. Timmins isn't ready. He's not going to be ready for the Sweden trip next week, so you don't have that option quite yet. McCabe is coming back, so you're going to have to take somebody out. I think Simon Benoit's been fine too. I mean, he's been surprisingly not that noticeable, which is, I think, what you want from a guy like that.
Yeah, they've been fine stopgap Band-Aid solutions. They're not the major issue here. I would say that you could have better depth, but they're not. This hasn't been a situation where those two guys came in and you're going, oh crap, this is the fourth line, but on the blue line where you can't play these dudes. They've been all right. It's the other guys. It's the same things as before, which is Klingberg has been god awful. His offensive output is not even coming close to outweighing the defensive drawbacks. And you're leaning way too much on Mark Giordano, who they tried to take some minutes away from yesterday, but I think that was still just more byproduct of him playing with Klingberg, right? And Keefe going, yes. I don't know what the hell to do here. And after the game, he says we have to protect him better. And to me, that only means, well, you're going to shelter him on a third pairing, but that's a $4+ million third pairing defenseman who like you mentioned Timmins. I've made fun of Timmins a lot, just not him personally, but just the way that Leaf fans have treated him as though he is just a savior kind of player, when in reality, I think he's just exactly what he is, which is a solid offensive, but seventh defenseman. I think that there's going to be a real case when Timmins does come back that he can't be worse than what Klingberg's giving you right now.
No. Nobody. I mean, you could take anyone up from the Marlies and they wouldn't be worse than what he's doing. I mean, the clips, like you go back and you watch the replays of the goals, and not even the goals, just some of the plays that Klingberg makes, and it's terrible. Mm-hmm. I can't think of any Leafs defenseman I've seen that's in this big of a funk that he is right now.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't look like an NHL player.
I don't like trying to bury guys or feeling like I'm complicit in burying a guy. Because this one just feels like it's going to be pylon city over the next 48 hours on Klingberg, right? And I would imagine that it's going to be difficult for him, and he's going to have some really tough sessions in the film room. But I mentioned it on Leafs Talk last night. The 5th goal that the Leafs gave up, the one that was in transition right after the penalty kill, that failed. The power play goal for the Senators. I don't think, I really believe that will be the worst defensive zone coverage you'll see all season from the Leafs, unless it's Klingberg doing something again. And he's already had some bad ones, but go run that tape back and watch him on that. It's incredible. He's giving guys the entire rink. He can't get up on a body. When he does, he's getting blown by. He's out of position constantly. He looks utterly lost. And yeah, the Oilers, they waived Jack Campbell, and I know that he got a way longer runway, but I actually kind of feel like, how long can you go into this, right? You're going to go to Sweden, you're going to take him there. That's going to happen. You hope maybe he finds himself there. You hope he finds himself in Sweden, and you come back and you've got a different player. But I kind of think that that's on the table now, the way that he's playing.
Yeah, I agree. And to be honest, I'm working on writing a column that basically says the same thing, that it's probably either Reaves or Klingberg. I think you got to change up the mix.
Or both.
They're so tight, or both. They're so tight against the cap that you probably got to waive somebody. I mean, you're not going to send Robertson down with the way he's playing. You're not going to send Lagesson down with the way he's playing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't make a trade, I think even if they can start perusing the waiver wire and just try somebody different, or make the kind of trade that Minnesota's been struggling to make that trade yesterday. They send out Addison for a pick and bring in Zach Bogosian and just change the look on their defense, send out an offense first guy that was barely playing and bring in someone that might be able to settle you down a little bit. I mean, Bogosian's not going to change the world, but he's a guy that's been in the league a long time, and you can play 15 minutes and feel okay about it. And I mean, wouldn't you love to have Bogosian right now? I mean, he would be in the lineup over, and he could play on the penalty kill, which is, I mean, the penalty kill is a tire fire for this team too. So last night I was doing some of the math on it, and when Klingberg's been on the ice at 5-on-5, the Leafs have allowed it's like 59% of the scoring chances and expected goals have happened when he's been on the ice. It's a huge percentage of every chance against. If you got rid of all of the Klingberg minutes, so all the non-Klingberg minutes at 5-on-5 for the Leafs are actually in a position where they're basically a break-even team at even strength. Like, he's a huge part of the reason why they're so far underwater in scoring chances and expected goals and puck possession and all of these things we look at. He's the biggest reason, to be honest.
Yeah. And
then Reaves is another cherry on top as well, that whenever he's out there on the fourth line, that's dragging them down too. So there's a way where they could not play both of those guys. Just do it for a couple of games and see what it looks like. Because I'm pretty sure at this point it's going to look better than what they've been doing.
Can I tell you something, though? That actually makes me feel more optimistic, because I was going to ask you to basically rank your biggest concerns right now. Because for me, it's number one, just the blue line and that Klingberg signings / Reaves. Those two guys, the money that they're eating up. And if you actually think about it, if you apply what you just said, you take those two guys out of the lineup, and you're immediately much better, And so you blew it. You blew the signings, but at least there's a bit of a silver lining, which is, all right, if you figure out that you move on early enough and you're able to even just put replacement level players in here, and that you're a break-even team, I think that's better for you, especially given right now where the record's at and how much more competitive the Atlantic looks this season, and just where this team's probably at a bit mentally with how many goals they've given up, that you sort of have just a ready-made solution. It just feels like, man, you do that. You're Sheldon Keefe. You've tried to build this relationship with Brad Treliving. What do you think? How do you think the Leafs could handle that optically? Because that seems like that's the only reason not to have these guys is your brand new GM gave two of the players that we're talking about over $5 million combined.
I mean, I think you just do as much damage control as you can and say, this is temporary, and we're not winning games, and we need to change the mix, and we need them to go down to the Marlies for a couple of weeks and be good pros, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I don't think
the Marlies ain't fixing Ryan Reaves.
No, I know, but it's more of a cap issue for them right now, because they can't even carry an extra forward with how tight they are to the cap. So for Reaves, it's just like you have to waive him, or you got to go down to 6 defensemen, which they could do. They got 2 home games coming here. They could send down. I mean, I guess they could send down Benoit if you're going to play Klingberg against Calgary on Friday. And you could call up another forward, and you could just sit Reaves. I mean, that's like your baby step towards what I'm talking about. You don't have to go full nuclear wave 2 guys that you spent $5.5 million on, $5.5 million on in the offseason. You don't have to do that, but at some point it feels like that's going to become an option.
Well, like I said, I think it's going to be important for Klingberg to go to Sweden. He's going home. He gets to play in front of a Swedish crowd. Maybe that's your hope. This is a Hail Mary.
Are you going to leave him there? Is that where you?
Well, maybe if he's horrible over they play 3 games there, right? Is it 3 they played in
Two.
Sweden?
It's 2. They just played 2 games. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing too, JD. Is they only have 4 games to play in the next. It's like 4 games in 3 weeks or something like that. So they're not going to get a lot of chances to play their way out of the funk. They have to win one of these games against Calgary and Vancouver. They have to at least look okay because there's a huge gap. And then you've got the 2 games over in Sweden. Who knows what those are going to be like, right? Like they're playing in weird time zone, and they're in the Globe Arena, which is going to be a lot different than an NHL arena. And I mean, I don't know.
They get to play Minnesota again, right? And they look great against Minnesota this year. That was one of the games where they scored 1 million goals, and it was a Matthews hat trick game. That was their style. I don't know. I think that's what you're doing here is you're bringing those guys on the trip because you're hoping. And if you sign Ryan Reaves for the room, then you're bringing him on this trip, right? You're not sending him down before this happens. I think you play these 2 games out, you take the trip, and then when you come back, you're starting to ask yourself the really hard questions of what happens with him, like Klingberg. Is he now just a waived guy? And same with Ryan Reaves, and that you are potentially just doing the nuclear thing after. Like that's the way I see it. If Klingberg can't turn around Sweden, to me it's over. And Reaves, I already think it's just an inevitability. It's just, to me, you're kind of killing a little bit of clock and saying, well, how much is 8 minutes of Bobby McMahon going to make versus having that guy on the trip with this team when you're trying to bond a bunch of the players?
Yeah, no, I'm fine with waiting through Sweden and seeing if it's going to turn around. But if it doesn't, which it might not.
Yeah, I don't think it will.
It's plausible. I think, like you said, the positive is there is an easy out here. Like, there is a way to shuffle the lineup and do something. You know, they're not so boxed in that they're just stuck. I mean, I think that the most preferable thing is make some kind of a trade and change the mix. I mean, they need to get like 2 new faces in there, guys who have a little bit more confidence, and that. I mean, they need some. Not to sound like a broken record, but I think they need like some physicality. They just need someone that's what I like about McMahon is he'll just come in and he'll just crash around on the forecheck and at least bring some energy because they look. That fourth line goes out there, and you're just watching them skate around in their own end the whole time.
I know. That's Reaves, guaranteed, despite his lack of minutes, leads the NHL in standing flat-footed in the middle of his own zone, pointing to the other guys where the puck is. He can't move. He can't catch it. He's just got to sort of stand and maybe hope a puck hits him from the point because that's just the only hope that he has of affecting the play in any type of positive way when he's in his own end.
It was really underplayed when they signed him, but he's one of the oldest players in the league.
Yeah.
Like he's 37, I think, in January, so he's coming up on that. So, yeah, Giordano's old, but Giordano won a Norris Trophy. Ryan Reaves was always a fourth-line guy, and he's old. So to get 3 years it was really baffling at the time when they signed it, and now it looks much, much worse.
Yeah, that's the thing when it comes I don't know how a trade can materialize right now that involves any of these players, right? Like who's trading for Klingberg? Who's taking that money on, right? That's a deadline. You're packaging pieces to the contract to have some money in, money out with another team.
Unless you go to some bottom feeder team and really entice them, and you could even retain a part of it. But
that's what I mean. I'd rather sit on Klingberg and wait until you get close to the deadline and then package those assets with him and say, take this money, take this contract. We're putting extra assets on top of this, but we also need something back from you. You know, like we're going to need something. It actually, this reminds me more of an NBA trade. Like, if you follow the NBA, it's very much, hey, you have to salary match in the deals. And sometimes when a team gets a really good player, you get a bunch of what's called, the expiring contracts back. And you hope that you can just dump some of that money, but it's attractive to some bad teams because they say, well, we're getting off this money immediately. And maybe Toronto's solution is to take a little bit more term from someone who's better than Klingberg, someone who is... a better fit for their roster, but that you're hoping, or that the other team views as, we don't want to be paying this person for the next 3 years. You figure this out. You're kicking the problem down the road. Because I just don't think that Klingberg, I hope he will. I hope he can turn it around. I've liked some things about his season. I actually thought there was a little bit too much of a drumbeat, and then last night happened, and I went, okay, I can't zag on this anymore. It's very apparent that the guy just cannot play, and he's absolutely killing this team. With Reaves, I think it's a pretty simple solution. You're hoping that you're figuring that out. The problem is you're just, You don't need to play Ryan Reaves. You can have the three lines, essentially. The forward groups are kind of working. They worked last night. Seems like they found a little bit of something. Robertson looks a little better. Bertuzzi, I thought, found his game more last night. There's no real workable solution for the blue line in the immediate future, in my opinion. Like, I don't see where they're going to get a better penalty kill from. I don't see where they're going to get a better blue line.
Yeah. Well, I mean, McCabe should be back anytime. Timmins should be back.
He has to be so much better, though, eh?
After the Sweden trip. I mean, I don't think it can get worse. At least you're getting some. I mean, the thing, too, is McCabe was bad when he was playing.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's just, you could swap in one guy who, it can't be as bad as what Klingberg's doing right now, but he was damn near close when he was healthy.
I mean, Logren was playing so well that losing him, it's funny. You know, he comes in as a third pair guy, your fifth defenseman, and he was actually, Logren was leading the team in some of those, you know, the advanced stats, the analytics. He was ahead of everybody, and you know, whether that was on the third pair or when they moved him up to the second pair, and who would have believed coming into the year that losing Logren would be such a crushing blow? They just, with so many guys struggling. I mean, it's having a knock-on effect now, right? Because you can see, like, Brody's playing way too much, and now all of a sudden Brody's making mistakes and doesn't look good, and taking bad penalties, and you know, Brody's again another older guy. Like, you can't play him 24, 25 minutes. You can't play Giordano big minutes. You can't play Klingberg big minutes. Someone's got to play, you know. So you're right. I mean, they need another defenseman. So, I think you just got to start kicking tires and looking for one of those minor deals. And maybe they're thinking that, you know, McCabe and Timmins are going to be back and that's the solution, but it could be painful waiting for those guys to be ready.
How do you see the penalty kill improving? What's wrong with it?
They don't have the right personnel for it. Mm-hmm. Like, they got rid of, like, how many guys are really good penalty killers that they've got left?
I thought Camp was a great penalty killer, and then I don't know what happened to Camp this year. Yeah. Part of it was that he was playing with Reaves at the beginning, and then he got some shifts up the lineup a bit, and we thought, all right, maybe this is going to be better, and then it didn't really improve things. But his number one function has to be that he is just a stud defensively, and he hasn't been that this year.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think it's coming like the back end, like you're relying on Giordano so heavily there. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is where Justin Hall was super underrated, and they miss him, and they didn't really replace that. Like, part of why I was surprised when they signed Klingberg was not just how much it was and the fact that he's struggling, whatever. He just isn't what they needed at all. Like, they needed a right shot, right side defenseman who could kill penalties. That's really what they needed, and that's why they tried to get Gudas. Presumably, they tried to keep Luke Shen and weren't able to come there on the money, but. Klingberg just isn't. They came into the season without filling some of the needs that they had. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I don't see them like having radically changed anything tactically on the penalty kill. Although the penalty kill wasn't very good last year, so perhaps the case is they are trying some different things. They're certainly trying different personnel. Like dropping Marner from the top penalty kill unit to the second unit. I mean, that's going to hurt you for sure because Marner's so good there. Mm-hmm. I mean. Maybe Kampf needs Marner there just to be someone who can be a little bit more multifaceted than, let's say, Yarncroc. But I don't know what you do on the back end on the penalty kill, though. Like, who do you feel good about putting out there? I mean, they've been putting Lagesson out there. Mm-hmm. You know, Riley's never been a guy that's penalty killed a lot, and they have to rely on him now. They just don't have the personnel, I think, a big part of it. And then you add in the way the goaltending has been, and that kills you on the penalty kill.
Here's the thing. They need McCabe to come back and play well. They need McCabe to play the way that he did during his first couple weeks with the Leafs, where he was making some big hits, but he wasn't taking too many risks, and he wasn't trying to do too much offensively. This year, he clearly was trying to do that early, and he was all over the place. He was scrambled. And he's got to come back and be a bit of a stabilizing force. I think that they actually kind of do need to hit on a Lagesson in terms of, okay, or a Benoit, one of those two guys they have to have as a semi-decent penalty killer who can move bodies from the front of the net. Because I just don't see how they can keep leaning on Giordano to do this. And you're right. The bigger issue is how much they're leaning on Brody and how important he is to this team. and the way that he looked last year during the playoffs, and whether or not any of that had to do with him wearing down over the course of the season. I don't want to see.
I'm sure it did.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure
I don't want to see TJ Brody playing 23, 24 minutes a night during the regular season. And that's what kind of sucks for this team. Maybe it ends up benefiting them that they don't have to coast through a regular season, that it's going to be a bit more of a battle. But I don't think that you want the battle to be your top players getting grinded into dust over the course of a regular season to get there. You are going to have to hit on some depth pieces. And yeah, I just think the penalty kill has to improve. It can't be this bad. It can't be 7 goals in the last 6 games. It can't be, how many goals have they given up in the last 3 games, the Leafs? I think it's 17. It's just, that's a lot of goals to give up in 3 games, people. They got to start finding ways to keep the puck out of their net. And yeah, that's why it's hard to see what the Klingberg leash is, because he just feels like the easiest solution. I know it's dumping on one guy, but man, it feels like you pull that one thing, and maybe, what would you say? It's 59% of the pucks that have gone in the net this year. He's been on the ice. Just limit
the scoring chances against it, 5-on-5. Yeah,
removing some of those things, and it's a little bit better. Okay, so here's the other one, right? Because those two are obvious. Those two, it's just, if they don't improve, I think Tree Living is a good enough hockey mind, and also is just new in the job. There's some pieces to this too where I keep thinking, man, he wanted to sign Ryan O'Reilly and Luke Shen, and if those two guys are Leafs, Kampf isn't a Leaf, and neither is Klingberg. And so if that happens, his first moves, these don't happen. He didn't go like, let's get Riley out of town. Like, Klingberg is my number one destination point. God, I want this lottery ticket. It was, boy, there's nothing left. I need to buy this lottery ticket.
Yeah.
We're completely broke. This is all I have.
They should have just been patient and said, you know what, we're going to address defense based on, we'll claim some on waivers. We'll make a minor trade. We're going to have all this cap space. Like, we're going to go into the year with $3-4 million extra that we can do something with. That's what they should have done.
Agree. But where I'm going with this is that I've got to think he feels comfortable enough in his role to say, hey, hand up. I should have done what you just said, and we're waiving Klingberg, and we're waiving Reaves. And he's not going to put that on the coach, right? He's not going to say, hey, this was on you. You could have used these players better. This isn't like when they fired Babcock because of Barry, right? Or in part because of Barry. And then all of a sudden it was, oh, look, they're getting more from Barry. I just don't think that Tree Living is going to go to the wall over keep Klingberg in the lineup when he's playing this way. But if we're looking at this Sweden trip, and then we're getting close to American Thanksgiving, and there's fire DJ chance, and Edmonton wants a brand new coach. And if you look at the fan base right now, they're out for blood when it comes to Sheldon Keefe. I've been in the position that I'm not really there. I'm not a huge lover of Keefe, but I also have a real tough time faulting him for this. The question is, do you think that his job security is in peril if they can't turn this around over the next couple of weeks?
I mean, they did give him a contract extension, which,
but I
believe
is kind of fake.
Was it? I don't know. Is it? I mean, I know that ownership did not like eating. Yeah, ownership did not like eating. But why did they have to give him more than 1 year then? Like, normally when you're fixing the lame duck problem, you just tack a year on, and that's the fix.
This is just my completely uneducated opinion. It's pure optics. We're trying to steady the ship. There's no other coach that's available to us this year that's going to be any good. And if you fire him, you're probably just promoting someone internally for the year, and then you're going into the offseason.
It's a decent amount of money, though, that the Leafs would have to eat on Keefe. I mean, I guess
did you see what the Leafs are worth?
Yeah,
they're going to be fine, buddy. They're going to be fine. I know. I love how people they really don't like eating the money. They didn't like paying off Babcock. Babcock was what, $5 million a year for 3 or 4 more years? Was it even more than that?
It was like 6 point something for 4 years.
Oh,
yeah.
It was 5. Yeah. So
all I know is that ownership hated it. So ultimately, it's up to them whether they want to do it or not. And I think Keefe's deal. I think he's pretty close to $3 million. So it's not like he doesn't make anything. I don't know. I think that his leash is longer than a couple of weeks, basically, to answer your question.
Yeah, okay.
You know, I think it's if they're completely a mess in January or something, then you pull that maneuver and you try and, get out the shock paddles and try and get the team back to what it should be. But there's other things that we've already just talked about that you could do that should improve things. Like, give the man some more tools here. We'll see what happens with Calgary. If Calgary keeps falling into the death spiral that they're in, maybe they pull the ripcord, and maybe they're looking at trading a defenseman a lot earlier than the deadline, and that's when Tree Living has to act. And if he would have kept that $4 million cap space just sitting there, he'd be ready. He wouldn't have to push money out to do it. But you get a Hanifin or a Chris Tanev or a Zadorov in here, and it's going to help a whole lot.
Yeah. Man, they would just kill for Zadorov. That's the one for me where I'm like, please, find a way to make that work. The only, my pushback to the Tree Living should have waited thing is, had this team come into the season with cap space and then they were losing games, it's just people would have been mad either way. There was no win here for the team.
Or JD, just like sign a bunch of guys that are like 1.1 million, take flyers on them, and if they don't work, you can dump them like you did Lafferty. They could have just added another defenseman and another 2 forwards, carried a full roster, had some extras there. I mean, that would have been more valuable than having Klingberg right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. But the part of the Klingberg thing I don't really understand is how he got the money he got. Like,
Me neither.
Who are you competing with for that? It's the same thing with the Reaves. I know Minnesota wanted Reaves back, and they probably offered 2 years, but yeah, there's got to be a breaking point with with a 37-year-old player who can't skate. Of okay, you want 3 years? We're sorry. It's just that's not it. If I was ownership and you're talking about firing a coach, I'd be probably a little bit more pissed off at the actual hockey players we can't put on the ice that cost more than the coach. that would piss me off more when that conversation has to happen. Is hey, sorry, you got to keep cutting this check to Ryan Reaves over the next couple of years. Anyway. Are you ready to do some positives then? Because I do have some of those.
Okay, I wasn't expecting that today. Sure.
Well, I think that there are some. Like, this is the thing. Matthews has been a man possessed. Nylander looks phenomenal, and I think that him returning to the homeland is only going to make that even better because it's going to be a nice spotlight shine on him. I think he's going to have a great time. I think he's going to have a really great time showing the rest of the Maple Leafs around Sweden and playing in these games against, what is it? It's the Red Wings and Wild, right?
Yes.
Like they should accumulate
It's funny,
points
Ottawa's
there.
over there and they're not playing them.
That's why I thought they had 3 games there. I couldn't get that out of my head. I went, okay, well, yeah, they're playing Ottawa again, right? No, wrong. They're not. They're playing the other 2 teams. I think that their star players, you can feel really good about them taking a bit of a step forward. Marner looks like the guy from last year, essentially. Looks really good. Maybe a little bit worse, but he had just come off a bunch of really good games. Nylander is clearly improved. This isn't just, this is the same guy as last year. No, this is a better player than last year. He looks stronger. He looks quicker. He looks more confident. He's shooting the puck better. He's just a better all-around player. And I don't think anybody, like, the other good thing is you can't even worry yourself about the contract right now because there's so many other things to worry about. It's like, who cares? If you have to pay that guy $11 million, who cares if he's that? And now I think you saw a good performance from Bertuzzi last night. Like you could squint and see how this works out. I kind of feel like maybe the Leafs could potentially have their best top 6 in a really long time. Maybe their best ever.
Robertson's come in and played pretty well and done what you want him to do is provide some timely offense. Domi looks a little bit better playing with Robertson in the sheltered role, playing down the middle. I mean, like if we're in positive corner, there's a world where this turns around, right? Like they have good players. This still should be a good team, but they're being undone by. I don't think the whole team is playing terribly. I mean, we know that. We know that. It was interesting though. I mean, Sheldon Keefe's answer last night. Did you hear it? He kind of said, we celebrate the big numbers for the big guys.
Before it came on.
I did not hear that, but we celebrate all the big numbers, but we don't talk enough about defense. I mean, I don't see the big guys cheating defensively. Like often when the goals are going in, it's very clearly like I haven't seen a play where, at least in the last few games, like there hasn't been a play where Matthews or Tavares or Marner were to blame. There's been a couple where Nylander, maybe could have had the man at the point and stuff like that, but that's not why they're losing these games.
Completely agree. I'm a little bit more optimistic, at least about the top. Well, I'm definitely more optimistic about the top 6. But even if you can, get something from Domi, get something from that third line, you're laughing. you're laughing because I think the fourth line is going to be eventually an easy fix. And if it's Camp, McMahon, and Gregor, I think that line can at least become a something eventually. And that, like we said, we pointed to it. It's pretty easy to just simply say, yeah, there's one guy who's been on the ice for 9 goals against this year and on for none. That's going to be a pretty quick and easy solution at some point this season. But yeah, I don't know. I've liked that. I think Riley looks terrific this year. I'm not overly concerned about Woll. I think that the next game is going to be really important for him. I would imagine that he gets the Saturday game. But yeah, these next two, though, just feel really important to steady the ship heading into the Sweden trip. But I do think, again, just staying on positive corner, I think that there's a reality here where the Leafs win 4 straight hockey games and everything's fine.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly could. I mean, their schedule's not that tough.
That's what I'm saying. There's really one tough game on the schedule over the next 4, and that's Vancouver on Saturday night on the second half of a back-to-back.
Yeah, and Vancouver's on a ridiculous heater. Like they've got you look at everything they're doing is like super unsustainable, kind of the other way from the Leafs. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know with Woll. It's just like you never know with a young goalie, right? Like it could spiral on him a little bit. Like that's watching the game yesterday. That was my concern. It's like, I think he'll be able to get it back. He's one of those really mentally tough young goalies, but. If they have to add both the goalies struggling on top of the way that the blue line's playing and the way the penalty kill is, that's going to be too many things struggling for them to reel off some wins here.
Bang on. This is kind of, to me, a real make or break part of the schedule. When you're talking about the nuclear, and why I asked about Keefe is just because it's this trip where there's going to be a lot of space and time for people to talk about the team. And maybe the getting away part is going to be great for this team, being on different hours as Toronto, getting away from all of the stories and having them mostly be just positive things of excited Swedes to see the Leafs. But yeah, I got to feel like you got to go into this trip feeling positive. Because if you lose these back-to-back games, Flames-Canucks, you lose the Canucks on Hockey Night in Canada, and the discussion becomes how Vancouver has completely turned this around and Toronto's window is maybe closing. You go on the road, all of a sudden you need to have wins against, the Wings and Wild. You come back and it's Chicago and Pittsburgh. It's just, this is a soft spot of the schedule with a lot of travel, a lot of rest. You got to win. I think you got to come out of that stretch against these teams, those 6 teams I just mentioned, with 4 wins minimum. Like anything less than that is an absolute disaster. So yeah, it's already, you know what? I brought you on today to be like, hey, what's the concernometer? And I was pretty calm and I was pretty positive about what was happening up to this point. I won't be that after this next stretch of games, this next 6 games, if they're still doing the same things and everything looks the exact same. James, got to let you go. Thanks for making time today, buddy.
Yeah, thank you.
See you, pal. James Mirtle, Senior Managing Editor at The Athletic.